Do you find your scrap projects are only ho-hum? Are you looking for ways to control the chaos? Are you wanting a fast and easy way to use up your scraps? In this quilting tutorial, we're going to be looking at ways to make your scrap quilts, well, less scrappy, bringing some control and structure to your designs so that they are a joy to make and a joy to receive. And stay to the end where I'll be sharing some bonus layouts. So stick with me and I'll show you how to do it. Hi, I'm Karen Brown of Just Get It Done Quilts. I give you tips, tricks, and strategies to help you make the quilt that you want to make. And if you like what you see, please click that subscribe button. When a person looks at a quilt or any piece of artwork, their brains are looking for balance, symmetry, and focus. And when we use scraps to make a quilt, those elements might not be immediately obvious. So we can use up a lot of brain power trying to figure it out. And there's some people that don't find that feeling pleasing or satisfying. Here are 7 ways you can be more intentional with your scraps so that you can make quilts that people want to receive. Many of us like using all the colors in the color wheel. You throw them in a pile and pull them out one by one. However, for many people, that's just too busy. So one of the easiest ways to make your quilt less scrappy is to use a limited color palette. And there's several ways that you can do this. You can work with just one color. And when I say all one color, like this red, you get to use all the reds, from these dark garnet reds to these very light blushes. It doesn't matter if the fabric has other colors in it, as long as the dominant color reads red. If you prefer, you can also use 2 colors, following those same rules. Now, you might be a new quilter, or your Mount Scrapmore doesn't have enough of 1 or 2 colors to make a quilt top. So you can expand your palette to include all the warm colors or all the cold colors. You can also consider rainbowing your colors. That is having a defined row or section for each color as it follows the colors in the rainbow. And it doesn't need to be perfect to have an effect. Now, before we go any further, I want to remind you that you do not need to make all these blocks at once. Use your scraps to make bonus blocks and collect them in a pile over time. You can collect several different types of blocks as well, depending on what types of scraps you have and what you feel like making. Then when you're in a mood to make a quilt top, then you just go to your stack and pull out what colors you want. You spend a whole lot of time curating the fabrics that you will use for your quilt top, and you will work mixing and matching them until you have a stack of fabrics that work together. So it's a no-brainer that all the scraps from that project will work well together too. I often use them up in making the back of my quilt, and I call this my after quilt. And I have a complete series on how you can make one yourself. However, there will be times that you don't have the energy, time, or desire to make one. So as you work through your quilt project, keep all your scraps together. And when you finally have the time to process those scraps, keep them together to make a scrappy quilt top for another project. Again, you know that these colors work well together, you just need a layout. From the fabrics I used to make my husband's quilt, I made this baby quilt. And from the scraps of my Kinship Fusion quilt, I made these baby quilts. Here are the leftovers of my Capella cluster quilt. I'm not sure what the end game will be, but I'm using them as leaders and enders until I think up something. Sometimes you make a pile of blocks and you find that they're just lacking the cohesion you're looking for. No matter how you lay them out, it can feel like trying to make $1 out of 99 cents. That's where sashing can come to the rescue. With sashing, we can give the blocks some room to breathe. Or rather, the blocks are far enough apart that their colors and patterns are not competing with each other. I do have a video on sashing, giving you some guidelines on size, color, and layout. And choosing a fabric for your sashing in a neutral color can quiet down a busy quilt. And when I said neutral, I didn't mean boring. I mean a color that pulls it all together. And though it is often a desaturated gray or beige, it can also be a red or a lime green or something else. So be sure to lay out your blocks on a number of different backgrounds and choose one that gives you the results that you want. The log cabin block is a scrappy one, and it's traditional to use a piece of red fabric in the center of every block. One repeating color in the center gives our eyes something to rest on and enjoy the symmetry of the rest of the quilt. And you can take this idea and repeat it in your scrappy blocks. The key is to only use this one fabric in the one spot. So you probably have lots of one type of scrap fabric, like the remains of backing fabric. You know what I'm talking about. We have these strips from the tops and the sides and all the leftovers at the bottom. These are great choices to use as a common fabric in a series of blocks. Here I have used them as the center diagonal strip in some Quilt-As-You-Go blocks. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a fabric from your stash for this purpose as well. Like I use this peacock blue linen for these narrow strips between my adding machine tape strips. This quilt is so busy with a million zillion scraps. These blue strips just give a little bit of organization to the chaos. When your stash is not large, or you have yet to devise a plan for your scraps to flow through your space, or you just don't have any brain power at the end of the day to think up some clever design for your scraps, just let value do the heavy lifting. For me, that meant pairing a dark fabric with a light fabric, as I made 4 patches with mini charms, zigzag layouts with potato chips, and 6x12 block with leftover jelly roll strips. These blocks were made by making the pieces as leaders and enders. And as I said before, eventually you'll have enough to make a cool top. Using scraps doesn't mean that your whole quilt needs to be made out of scraps. They can be used as filler, as I did with this baby quilt. The top was just a bit small, so scraps that match the quilt in these flower sack patterns were sewn into strips and used as borders. Or in this Quilt-As-You-Go braid quilt, strips of neutral fabric were used as a background. It works in this small baby quilt, and it also works in this twin size quilt. Separating the braids allow the scraps to shine and show the symmetry in the blocks, giving energy and focus. It also used up a lot of scraps as well. Fussy cutting your scraps injects so much fun into your layout. You might think your scraps are too small to fussy cut, but you can still discover all sorts of gems that you would not have used otherwise. And you don't need to fussy cut the whole block, just one piece will do. I'm a bit shy to show you these, but I'm working on some 2.5-inch economy blocks. Those centers are less than 1.5 inch. And I know I may be a bit nutty, but finding scraps that I can use is a challenge that I enjoy. And I only have 830 more to go. So how many blocks will you need to make a scrap quilt? I have a free download on my website, and the link is in the video description below. You use the sheet that corresponds to your finished block size. You can work with the number of blocks that you have to see what size quilt you can make, or you can work with the desired quilt dimensions to figure out how many blocks you need. There's one for square quilt layouts and one for on-point layouts. And it's been updated a number of times, so be sure you have the latest versions. You know that I love making scraps flow through my sewing space and into quilts. Check out my Scrappy playlist for all my tips and tricks to make it fast and easy. Take care, and I'll see you next time.